Yeah, or, the algorithm. You know what I mean? It just pops up and, you're a young kid and you see, some attractive young lady on there or woman and you click that and boom, you sent down
Hmm.
the rabbit hole.
Welcome to Kryptonite. Today's guest is Thomas Kersting, a nationally recognized psychotherapist, parenting expert, speaker, television personality, and best-selling author. Tom is the author of Disconnected: How to Reconnect Our Digitally Distracted Kids and Raising Healthy Teenagers. For years, he has helped parents understand the growing impact of smartphones, social media, gaming, and technology on children and teens. Beyond his books, Tom has appeared regularly on Fox News and other national media outlets discussing parenting, mental health, and technology. He has also co-hosted A&E's Surviving Marriage and Monster-in-Laws and hosted programs for National Geographic, the Food Network, and Oprah's Wellness Network. Today we're discussing digital addiction, parenting, early exposure to adult content, artificial intelligence, and the challenges facing children growing up in a world where technology is becoming more powerful, more personal, and more influential than ever before. Thomas, welcome to Kryptonite.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. It's fixing my
Absolutely.
blinds here. I can see a little shadows coming in.
It's all good. Tom, for those that are not familiar with your work, what led you to write the book Disconnected?
So it's actually fascinating. This goes, we're going back a long time. I think I'm one of the first experts to start blowing the whistle on this. And we're going back to 2008. All right. I worked at a high school. I was doing that, my private practice, and I ran a committee called the 504 committee. So 504s are accommodation plans for students that have an
I know.
impairment.
I know.
Yep.
My son has one.
Yeah. So in September of '08, I remember we had our first parent meeting. So the parents would have to call, set up a meeting. And they come in and explain that their son, who was 14 or 15, had just been diagnosed with ADHD. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, that's kind of fascinating. Never seen that before at that age, right? Average age of diagnosis of ADHD is 8. And for a parent who has a child with ADHD, by the time that child's 5, you can't not notice the symptoms. And it's not something you get. It's a neurological condition you're born with. So here we are, have these parents, kids checking off all the boxes, inattentiveness, lack of focus, disorganization, some impulsivity. Following week, we have our next meeting, right? And again, and another set of parents with the same issue, a 14 or 15-year-old diagnosed with ADHD. Had never seen that previous to 2008. So it was at that point that I really started aggressively researching what was going on. Because this kept going on the whole school year. Like almost all of the majority of our referrals were for teenagers being diagnosed with ADHD, which didn't make sense. And a lot of people don't know this. And during my researches, I came across something called it was called Your Brain on Google, and it was a research study conducted by a guy by the name of Gary Small, who's a professor and physician out of UCLA. And what really caught my attention is in that study, one of the researchers coined a term that he referred to as acquired attention deficit disorder. And what he meant by that is that they estimated that roughly 70% of kids that are older, like 14 or 15, don't have ADHD. They have the symptoms of ADHD. And the reason they have the symptoms is because of modern day technology. It's called brain neuroplasticity. So any human being that's involved in anything that's considered highly stimulating for 3 hours or more per day, we have these neural pathways, these electrical impulses. The brain will adapt to that by growing new pathways, and it affects the executive functions of the brain at the same time. So that is when I started, really diving deep into this. I actually started lecturing back in first lecture I ever gave on this topic was in March of 2009, that long ago. And now, I've been blowing a whistle. I wrote Disconnected. The first edition was in 2016, and then the newer edition was 2020. And this is all we hear about now. It's out there all over the place. Everybody knows. And I'm still out there pounding the pavement trying to do my part.
Yeah, you were definitely an early whistleblower. Tom, when we talked a long time ago, this question, your answer blew my mind to this. The question was, what age, people ask you, well, what age should I give my child a smartphone? Tom, what is the answer that you gave that blew my mind?
And when I'm doing my lectures, that question comes up every time. And the answer I give, assuming it's all adults in the audience, is this: when you feel comfortable with your child watching pornographic behavior material, because that's inevitable. That's it's gonna be there. So parents listening, think about that.
Yeah. And what reaction or responses do you get when you give that answer?
It's almost like the jaws in a room all drop. And everybody's like, "Oh my god, I never thought of that." So it's a real shake, a real wake up call. And it's a profound answer. And I didn't create that. I saw that somewhere else. That's from somebody else. I don't remember who it was, but it just really stuck with me. And I was just like, wow, yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of hits right to the right to the heart right there.
Yeah. And it's 100% truth because even if they don't look it up purposely themselves, as you know, they'll either come across it accidentally or a friend will show it to them.
Yeah, or the algorithm. You know what I mean? It just pops up, and you're a young kid, and you see some attractive young lady on there or woman, and you click that, and boom, now you sent down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I refer to social media as the tailpipe of the mainstream media. So everything's caught on camera, and it funnels right to social media, and every violent act, carjacking, stabbings, you name it. And our children are inevitably going to start seeing that stuff at a very young age when they're not prepared to be able to be seeing that stuff psychologically.
Yeah. Giving a young child a smartphone is kind of like dropping them off in a bad part of town in the hood and saying, have at it. When you wrote the book, AI really wasn't a thing. But now, if you were to write Disconnected today with ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, all this, what chapter would you add or how would you change the book?
What I would add in there is with the concerning element, right? Yeah, so there's definitely some benefits to it, no question. But what concerns me is that when you're looking at a young generation, I call them the instant gratification generation. They don't really. There's not much effort that needs to be put forth for anything nowadays. You just hit a button and DoorDash delivers your food. Go on Amazon, bang, the product is there that day. And now with artificial intelligence, and I'm hearing this because I see a lot of teenagers, they're figuring out how to get around academics in school by using AI. And sometimes you could use it if you're going to use it academically to problem solve. Okay, but if you're using it so that you don't have to problem solve, what's going to happen to the human mind as we evolve if we're not using and we're not implementing critical thinking and higher level thinking anymore? What's going to happen?
Exactly. It's crazy. It's we're giving our thinking over to a thing. And I
Yeah,
was thinking about this before you came on. I thought, are smartphones yesterday's battle? Like with AI, I mean, it's a whole different thing now. Do you think
yeah,
smartphones are yesterday's battle?
yeah. Well, at some point, everything is yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, if we were standing in New York City right now, it's not what it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and it likely won't be what it is 100 years from now. And when you hear the term artificial intelligence, the thing that stands out to me is the word artificial, right? When I hear artificial, I think artificial sweetener, artificial coloring, you know, um, all things that we don't want. You know what I mean? That are artificial, that aren't real. So now we have artificial intelligence. I'm thinking, okay, so the intelligence of human beings is now going to be artificial. We're not going to be allowed to have real thought anymore because some AI computer is going to do this for us. That's pretty frightening when you really put it in context.
Yeah. Earlier you said the algorithm, and that is whether people realize it or not, for Facebook, for example, the algorithm is feeding them. And we used to worry about what kids were finding online, but now AI can interact with them directly. Does that change the equation now?
It does. And, there are people that actually use AI chatbots for therapy. Okay. Like we're using, so something artificial is attempting to give real strategic psychological advice. And I just don't see that happening because in my profession, yeah, your knowledge and your understanding of the mind and mental health, of course, you have to have that. But more importantly, is the therapeutic relationship, is the human connection that you have with the person sitting in front of you. So that it's a lot of transference. Most communication, I think 90 something percent of communication is nonverbal. And that's an important part of the therapeutic process. And if that's stripped away now, um, I just don't see this being effective, using an AI chatbot.
Yeah, it's getting really weird. So there's a very popular speaker. I don't need to say his name. He has his own AI chatbot. You can download his app and you can quote unquote speak to him. And I got it just to check it out. And it's kind of spooky, but the one thing that it's not a live breathing human being that you're speaking to, although it seems like it. I mean, it really does. Like this app that I was using was very convincing. It wasn't perfect. It definitely had some challenges, but AI is really, if it were a human being, it would be an infant. It would be just barely born. And so this barely born infant, this version, this chatbot I was using was so incredible, but I knew it wasn't a person, and it was giving some advice. And I it's kind of hard to describe. It's like I guess there's no real accountability. That's the word. There's no real accountability because it's not a person. So you can do it or not do it. So what concerns you most about AI and children now?
Yeah, I've seen some stories recently where, some troubled youngsters are seeking help from a chatbot, and the chatbot continued to encourage this young person to take his own life. Okay, and
I
that's
saw it.
precisely what happened.
Yeah.
And I believe now there's a lawsuit with that company, rightfully so. And that's the thing. I mean, it's just where it steers these kids, even young girls. You see a lot of stuff with the eating disorders. All the sort of superficial nature of the world they live in and their aspirations, which aren't founded from something deeper than that, which is the human spirit. And when you look at young kids who, they're not nearly developed psychologically or emotionally, and they're spending the majority of their waking hours, immersed in this quote cyber slash artificial world. How do we think that's going to shape how they think? And when your thoughts are shaped rather than from real life experiences and dialogue, that just sounds like a losing proposition to me.
Why do parents often underestimate what children can access once they have a smartphone or access to an AI chatbot?
Yeah, you know what the real issue is. Everybody knows the longer we delay the issuance of a smartphone, where all that content's going to come through. We all know that, but there's an enormous amount of sort of peer pressure, even for the parents, right? Out there, I see it constantly where they hold off as long as they can, and now their son is like 12, and he's the only one that doesn't have a phone, and he can't get a hold of his friends. And those are some of those things. There's some accuracy to that. Um, and then that pressure sets in with where parents, they don't want to don't want their kid to feel left out. Understandable, but it's sort of like you're rolling the dice a little bit. Every kid is different. Not every kid's going to get sucked into this rabbit hole and have bad things happen to him or her. But it's sort of like I said, almost like Russian roulette, rolling the dice, and that's kind of where we are. And I'm hoping that because the word is out there, everybody knows this. All the parents, we all understand that this is the greatest cause of the mental health epidemic. And we just have to hope that parents start banding together and creating a new social conformity instead of conforming with what everybody else is doing because everybody else has a phone. You get groups of parents that come together and say, that's it. Our group, our school, whatever it is, we're not doing this. We're not getting these kids smartphones until they're much older.
Yeah. Tom, I totally agree with what you were saying about people think peer pressure. Oh, the other kids. No, there's parental peer pressure on these devices like you're talking about. And listen to this. We do not give our kids iPads or phones. Now my wife does do Pokemon Go with them, but as far as having their own iPad, they don't have one. As far as having their own smartphone, they don't. And every single parent that I've spoken to about this, like if we just get in a casual conversation about this, and I say, oh, by the way, we don't give our kids those devices, every single one of them, no exception, has said to me, oh my gosh, I wish we would have done that. Keep doing that.
Yeah, and Eric, I've lectured, like I told you, I've lectured all over the country, and I've never had a parent ever come up to me after the lecture and say, "Man, the smartest thing I ever did was get my kid a smartphone." But I've had countless, uncountable parents come up to me and say, "The biggest mistake I made was getting my kid a smartphone."
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other side of it too, while we're on the topic, right? These things here, okay, it's also a fear for parents. They've become sort of the umbilical cord between parent and child. So with schools, and I've been advocating for schools for many years to ban phones from being in the school. And, administrators understand that. But the real problem is the parents, right? Because the parents, they feel like, oh, what if there's an emergency? What if there's this or that? They become dependent on it. And
School
and part of that,
shooting.
yeah, and a lot of that is, yeah, that stuff is real. But when you really look at the statistics, it's like lightning. Getting struck by lightning is real. Not that I'm minimizing school shootings, but it's the fear that's just driven into this malleable subconscious of even us adults over and over and over again. And that's what our society is right now.
Yeah. And so there's also a peer pressure. I mean, like I said, the parents I spoke to are like, "Oh my gosh, that's so great," but sometimes there feels like there is a pressure to give the children devices, and it's not just between the the society and that pressure. It's not just the child giving you pressure. It can even be your spouse. And actually, I'm a great example of this. This is what I do for a living. And my wife bought my son a smartwatch. And there's studies shown that just wearing the watch, like we're bioelectric beings, right? We actually run on
Yeah.
electricity, right? And having that signal always on them is bad for your physical health, not to mention your mental health, of course. But so I'm saying that this goes so deep. Like, so my son, now he doesn't wear it very often. It's just as needed, but still, like, this is a real thing. Like, it could be even husband and wife.
Yeah.
Everybody has kryptonite. Maybe it's technology. Maybe it's pornography. If you're struggling with your own kryptonite and you'd like some help navigating it, visit powerfuleric.com. Now, let's get back to the show. It is. Tom, what conversations should parents have before giving a child a smartphone?
So I think the word you just used right there, the word conversation. Okay, um, that's that's something that we parents need more of. Okay, because that's part of what we call a relationship. All right, and the biggest predictor of a child's mental health outcomes is the relationship that they have with their parents. And we need to get back around the dinner table. We need to get these kids out of their bedrooms, right, into the family room. And we adults need to take ourselves away from this stuff too and be there and be together and converse and laugh and stuff like that. And the conversation, to answer your question, when your kid comes up to you and is begging for the phone, the conversation has to be like something like this. My dad very, very Catholic guy, right? Both my parents, I am too. My dad's like, reads the Bible, all that stuff. Really, really spiritual guy. And when we were
Mm-hmm.
growing up, he would say to us when we'd, say, "Come on, you got to trust me. You don't trust me." He'd say, "God didn't give you to me for me to trust you. He gave you to me for you to trust me." So that's the conversation we have to have. Like, we're the adults.
Yeah.
You need to trust, what I am telling you as your parent. And yeah, you're going to get the blowback, and that's part of parenting. You deal with it.
Tom, there's a great lady I know. Her name is Gia Valenti. She wrote a book specifically on this topic about having that conversation. And for the life of me at the moment, I can't think of the title of the book. Something with Moxie in it, I think. I don't remember exactly, but it's about just having that conversation with your kids. And in her book, they chose not to give, together, they decided not to give children cell phones.
And here's another thing, Eric, right? So at my office here, so I deal with a lot of kids, and mostly teenagers, young adults, young men. I get some kids in middle school, and a lot of kids up in this area. They go to sleepaway camp for the summer for like 7 weeks, out in Pennsylvania, upstate New York, and none of the sleepaway camps allow the kids to bring a phone with them. So when they're getting ready to leave sleepaway camp, it's like panic mode because it's like they're leaving without their left arm, right? And then September, they're there for 7 weeks. Early September, my phone rings. Parents will call me and say, "Oh yeah, want to get Johnny back in to start seeing you." And over the years, any of these kids that went away to sleepaway camp, when they return in early September when school starts, and we sit down, haven't seen them in 7 or 8 weeks, and I say, "Hey, how was camp?" And we talk about it. Then I ask them, what was the best part of camp? And the number one answer when I ask that is the following: not having my cell phone, my smartphone. Isn't that
Oh,
amazing?
wow.
And the reason
That is.
I'll tell you why that is. So human beings, kids alike, inherently, what do we crave? We crave dialogue. We crave relationship. And when they're up there without their phone and actually having conversations around the bunk, around the fire, making stories, right? Taking away memories, they're experiencing something they inherently crave that they didn't know they craved.
Awesome. Tom, what role should parents play as smartphones and AI becomes more integrated into children's lives?
Yeah, I think it's practice what you preach first, and that includes us. We talk about kids spending 8, 9 hours a day on devices, on screens. Parents do as well. We spend about around the same
Mm-hmm.
amount of. So step number one is we have to practice what we preach. We got to put these things down, when we're at home with our families, and we got to lead. We have to lead our kids, and we have to have them trust us, and we have to build that relationship. And there's got to be all of that love and trust, and it's never going to be a smoothly paved road. There's going to be some bumps, but that's what parenting's about, and that's what we signed up for.
Yeah. What's the word? We're modeling. We're modeling. They don't do what we say, they do what we do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tom, looking ahead, thinking about AI and gosh, robotics and looking ahead, say 5, 10 years, what do you think will be some of the challenges that we'll be facing?
I think one is college. Um, what I'm seeing anecdotally is a lot of young guys not going to college up here, and it's an area where the majority of people go to college, and they're going into trades. One of the reasons is college has become a big business. It's gotten very expensive, and a lot of these young people are coming out of college with specific degrees that don't even necessarily have any kind of job attached to it. And then there's also the fear of, even if you do have a job like accounting or finance, are those jobs going to be there? Is AI going to take that over? So I think there's some crossroads that lay ahead that remain to be seen. And you're starting to see more of a push for people going into trades like electricians, plumbers, things like that. And I think there's something to be said about that. Additionally, this mental health epidemic began really starting around 2012, which is consistent when smartphones became mainstream. And you look at the data, and it hasn't slowed down. It has not slowed down, and I don't see it slowing down. I see it accelerating even more. particularly because of something like AI. And unless the powers that be have some influence in there, um, it's kind of it's a little bit frightening. I hope I'm wrong in terms of what this generation is going to look like 5 years from now.
Yeah. Tom, if you had to leave one thought with a parent from this conversation today, what would you want that to be?
I'd want you know what I'd tell parents? I'd ask them a question. I'd say, "What are we? Human what? Oh, we're human beings, right? All right, we're not. We've become human doings. Oh, we're doing, doing, doing." So the advice I would leave them is, look, we gotta tap into the being part, and the being part is the breath of air, right? The present moment. It's not distraction. It's actually here and now. It's sitting in silence, right? It's delving inward. It's going below the surface where all the resources exist. Not all the stuff that people are in search of, happiness, joy, all this other stuff, doesn't exist out there. It's already in here, and we have to tap into that and experience that and bring that forth, and then our outside world will mimic what we're experiencing on the inside world.
Oh my gosh, you just striked a powerful thought here. We rely on, for example, Google or ChatGPT, and we have this amazing brain, and we are spiritual beings,
Yeah.
and we have the knowledge within, right?
It's innate. We're born with all that. We're born with joy, happiness, gratitude, confidence. All that stuff comes along the way, and it's like we're at a point now where instead of us using our minds are using us. It's a supercomputer subconsciously. When you're just exposed to never-ending content over and over again, that shapes what we are mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And what we really need to do is enter the silence. And that's where self is. Like self-esteem is who am I? It's not what other people think of me. It's like, what do I think of me? And a lot of people don't know self, particularly kids, because there's literally never a moment of just reflection, of sitting in silence for 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. I like to journal, and also I write in cursive when I journal too, which some schools don't teach cursive anymore. And I do some self reflection and meditation and prayer.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk just real briefly about some of the answers here. We talked about all the challenges, but now we're talking about some of the answers. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the number one, if you get a lot of parents, watch your podcast here, um, people always say, well, give me some tips, right? And the tips are pretty simple. Number one, if your kid already has a smartphone, that thing should never be in their bedroom with them overnight, ever. And that's if, as far as I'm concerned, a non-negotiable item. Okay, because I did a survey about 6, 7 years ago, and I was still working at a high school with 100 kids over the course of the school year, all of whom knew me, right? And they just come down to my office and be like, hey, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. Um, just doing a little research. And it's not going to leave my office. I promise you that. I'm not going to call your parents. I'm not using anybody's name. And just be honest with me. And they were. And the question I asked these kids was the following: what time do you go to sleep on school nights? And when I had completed 100 students, which took like months, of a kid coming down on a Tuesday or Thursday, 93 of the 100 kids told me that they went to sleep between 1 and 4 a.m. every night of the school week. And their parents,
Oh,
yeah, and their parents had no idea. And it's because the phone is in their bed.
wow.
The phone, they don't have control of the phone. The phone has control of them. So that's you start there. If you do get your kid a smartphone, set the standard right off the bat. That thing is not in your bedroom at night when you're sleeping. It should really be in there even when they're not sleeping, but in particular when they're sleeping, because we have a sleep deprivation epidemic now among kids in the United States.
You're blowing my mind. 1 to 4 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's insane.
And the parents don't know. They go to bed and the phone's in there. And then what do you do? Mom and dad collapse at 10 or 11 and bang, there they are back on their phone, doom scrolling through TikTok, group chats. And they may know. They may say, look, I need to get to bed at 11. And it's just too much for them.
Oh my gosh. And Tom, let's be completely honest. These young boys up late at night, it's not just TikTok they're on. They're watching pornography.
Yeah, yeah, that's another, yeah, and you know a lot more than I do about that, but it's out there, and there's a lot of issues with young boys in terms of developing real relationships, with young ladies, because that's not it's no longer perceived the way it should be. You know what I mean? It's like from being so tarnished from watching adult content constantly. And it's right there. You just hit, there it is. Anything you want.
Yeah, and that what you just brought up there is a whole other podcast. I found, there's people online now that are literally like falling in love with their AI. I mean, this is no joke, like for real.
I know. I've seen that. I know.
It's insane.
It's amazing. You know what's amazing about that too is like that person. This is what's scary. So, like you just described, I've seen those stories. Those individuals, right? They actually have that feeling of being in love with like this. You know what I mean? What? I mean,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, that's red flag galore right there.
Yeah. But Tom, you said one of the main things that you tell people is whatever you do, just don't let the child have the cell phone in the bedroom, right?
Number one, yeah.
That would be the
And
and go ahead.
yeah, another thing too, and this is just going back a number of years ago, when I was still working at the public high school as a counselor, 1,000 students, one entrance going into the school. And so it was always traffic going in there in the morning. And I just remember that this is when I was like really deep into my research. And I remember I noticed this every time I looked in the rearview mirror, kids in the passenger seat, mom or dad behind the wheel. And this is what the sight was 100% of the times.
Mm.
And I share that because that entire ride, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, there's no dialogue between the parent and child. Child is just immersed in this. And think about that, 180 school days a year. All that adds up, in terms of building a relationship with your child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once a device comes on, it seems to mute conversation, whether it's a pad, a phone, or television. It's time, then it's like, mute actual conversation.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. And that is like, and I remember this when I was driving my kids to when they were in high school. They're out of high school. There was none of that going on and the high school was about 15 minutes away where they went. And yeah, we had some of the greatest conversations. Sometimes they were tired and didn't really want to talk. That's okay. But there were a lot of times where just really good, bountiful conversations took place. And the conversation, the dialogue, is the foundation of the relationship between a parent and a child.
Absolutely. And I just keep thinking of Gia's work here. Her work started from exactly what we're talking about. She noticed that kids weren't very good at holding conversations. And so she wrote that book, and they've lost the skill of speaking, conversing, communication.
So even that, let me jump on that. All right. So when we hear the term IQ, your intelligence quotient, right? An IQ is fixed. So if you're born with like an IQ of 110, you're not getting it to 140. You know what I mean? You could read every book. You might be able to nudge it up a couple points, but it's fixed. Just like height. I can't all of a sudden, I'm 6'1", say I want to be 6'4", right? Now, EQ, which is emotional intelligence, let me explain what that is. It's the ability to understand one's emotions. It's the ability to empathize with the emotions of another. It's the ability to deal with adversarial situations and overcome them. It's the ability of a recent college graduate who didn't even do that great to go on a job interview and wow the people in front of them. That's part of emotional intelligence. Now, that is not something we're born with, and it's not something that's fixed. It's something that is learned. And the only way that it's learned, developing a strong EQ, and having a high EQ is twice as important for success in life as having a high IQ. And
absolutely.
The only way to develop it is from face-to-face interaction with other human beings. And if you're not doing that, if you're not using that and developing that, you're not going to have it.
Yeah. They say the number one reason people get fired is not because of their technical skills. Like they may be very, very good at the whatever the thing is that they're doing, but they get fired because they don't have emotional intelligence
Yeah.
and get fired over that
Yeah. And that's
because
just
they
part
don't
of, like,
play well with others.
yeah, it's like being on the job, like being a good dude and like people like you and conversing and also like, taking directive. If your boss says, look, you got to do this, instead of being like, well, I'm too good for that, or I should be the vice president of this company. That's part of the instant gratification nation. Um, those soft skills. That's a big thing. For that the companies are looking for the soft skills. Like, can this person like show up every day at 8 or 9 a.m. and stay there and not complain and not only do a good job but also relate to others? And it's something that is lacking more so than in previous generations.
Tom, before we wrap up here, can you give me one more tip? So you said, and I love that, just keep the phone out of the bedroom. What's another tip? And then just so I remember to ask you this, is there hope? Like, are we doomed?
Yeah, and I never, you know what? I don't think we're doomed. I'll tell you why, right? So I've seen people that I've counseled here when they were like teenagers, and then they come back when they're like in their mid to late 20s. So after that brain develops after 25, the prefrontal cortex, what I am seeing is that a lot of young professionals, like in their mid to late 20s, are recognizing that TikTok and Instagram and all this other stuff is a time guzzler and it's affecting their career. And they're actually like shutting it down. And because they see how much time it's taken away from, their pursuits with career and relationships and everything else. So I'm optimistic in that respect. But when we're in the thick of it, when our kids are, middle school and high school, it's about us, really parenting up, right? And setting the boundaries, setting the standards, delaying getting that phone for as long as possible, practicing what we preach, getting our kids out of the bedroom into the family room, getting them outside, involved in activities, whether it's sports or a job. We can't just have them loathing around in their bedroom scrolling all summer long. All summer long. So that's a very, really important thing, and it's easier said than done. But that's what our job is. Our job is to guide them, and we're going to take some heat, and that's okay. I remember I was on the receiving end of a lecture many, probably 20 years ago. The guy was speaking about teenagers. He wrote a book called "Yes, Your Teen is Crazy," and he said, and it's always stuck with me. He said, if your teenager doesn't hate you, you're doing something wrong.
Never thought of it that way. Well, anyway, Tom, this has been a really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for joining me today on Kryptonite. Where can people learn more about your work?
My website, it's just tomkersting.com. And as far as my books, just anywhere you could buy a book, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's anywhere the books are out there. And Disconnected is pretty profound.
Identified some kryptonite in your own life and you'd like some help navigating it, especially in the areas of addiction, sexuality, and personal growth, you can learn more about my programs at powerfuleric.com. I'll see you next time on Kryptonite.